There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. Guys, I've got with me today Isabelle Papoulias, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Mediafly, also was recently listed as one of Drift's 25 powerhouse marketers to follow. And I promptly did so myself once I saw that list come out, but was already slated to have you on the show, Isabelle. And so I'm excited for you to be talking with us. Guys, Isabelle's going to be talking to us about some misconceptions about the role of chief marketing officers and why some CMOs fail. But before we get into that, Isabelle, I'd love it if you would just give us all a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Mediafly are up to these days.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, Nikki. Thanks for having me on. So my background, I come originally from the marketing research side of things. That's how I started my career early on in New York, and then moved on to advertising and media agencies, both small and very large ones, managing global accounts for the most part. And I joined Mediafly 3 years ago. I actually joined in sales. And then lo and behold, 6 months into the role, I was asked to jump in and build marketing, given my background. And here I was thinking I had made a career change and back to marketing. But it was very exciting for me to be doing it, on the brand side of things and not in a client service capacity. So nearly 3 years now, about 2 of those in marketing, and I became CMO from VP of marketing earlier this year. Mediafly is in the sales enablement space. We are a company that provides sales enablement technology as well as advisory services to help reps be much more effective in front of prospects, when they're selling. Most sellers go to potential buyers with a one-size-fits-all PowerPoint, boring presentation, and our vision is really to make that process and that interaction a lot more engaging, more customized, more consultative to be able to close more deals. And the biggest challenges that we solve that for clients are mainly around helping clients give reps the right content at the right time when they're in front of a prospect, right? What's the most compelling content that you want to share in that moment, in that discussion, so that you can influence the buyer? And the other big challenge we solve is most companies produce a lot of sales collateral. Marketing teams produce volume, and they don't usually see how it's being used and if it's working, if it's moving the sales forward or not, or even if sales reps are using it at all, right? So we provide that visibility. As a marketer, you get to see exactly how your content is being used, what's not used, if the content is closing the deals, and it informs your marketing, your content strategy that way, right? And so our clients, with us helping them make their sales teams more effective in front of prospects, we help them close a lot more deals and drive revenue upwards of 60%, which is the end game. So that's the business we're in.
I love it. You and I talked offline about how I spent most of my career, my professional career as a salesperson, and this is just the kind of tool that I know folks need. And it's kind of hard sometimes to figure out. So is it just that the sales enablement technology is that part is blowing up, or are folks finding new and different ways that they want to approach sales, and then the technology is catching up. So just kind of off topic before we get into what we're getting into, what do you think about that as being somebody who's in the really huge sales enablement space?
So I think the way I would look at it, actually, there's a really compelling statistic that I came across recently, which is 93% of companies don't have sales enablement technology.
Oh,
that's huge.
Yeah.
So there's a huge opportunity there. And I think it's, again, that's what we need to do, right? It's the way we look at it, Mediafly is we want to make sales enablement accessible to all. The companies that have stepped into that space are the ones that are, the ones that have adopted it more quickly. They're perhaps more, the risk takers, and they're more innovative, right? But our vision is to democratize it, so to speak. There's this perception, largely because of CRM, and no offense to the CRM, platforms out there, but companies have been burned with CRM implementations, right? They're expensive, and they take a long time to implement, and they don't see the adoption. And so I think by osmosis, there's negative reputation for all other sales enablement tools. And the reality is that it doesn't have to be that way, right? Sales enablement doesn't have to be a risky proposition. It doesn't have to be complicated. And through, in fact, a recent acquisition that Mediafly made, what we're doing now is making it accessible, providing a low cost and easy entry point to sales enablement, so you can dip your toe in the water, so to speak, and then grow from there. Because the sales enablement journey is not the same for every company. There's companies who are looking for very basic content management solutions. Right? Just make it easy for me to organize the content, push it to the reps, make sure they have access to it, right? Mm-hmm. All the way to companies that are what we call evolved sellers, that are looking for very sophisticated sales presentation tools, like integration with third-party data. How do we visualize data to make it more engaging to the person I'm presenting to? How do I build in ROI calculators, in the conversation? And all kinds of customizations from there. That doesn't mean that everyone needs that. And then there's everything in between. So for us, our vision is providing really a suite of tools and products that meet the needs, your needs, whether you're at the very beginning of your journey or whether you're already pretty advanced and you're looking to up level.
For sure. So it's interesting. It's sales enablement, but most of the folks I'm talking to about these tools, right? People who buy the tools, and often the people who are responsible for getting people to buy the tool are marketers. And so I think that kind of goes into what we were talking about offline as far as what the role of a CMO really is, right? So talk to us a little bit about what it was like for you making the transition from a VP of marketing into a CMO role over your career, and what differences you've seen there, and then we'll get into some of the ways that role is expanding, contrary to what a lot of people might think.
So I would say for me, the biggest shift I'm noticing, and again, the change is recent, right? So I became CMO in March, but I'm feeling it in a good way. For me, the change is primarily, is going from what I call, marketing communications, right? So you deploy your awareness tactics and your demand gen tactics to a broader role where it's really you have the capacity to be much more involved in transformative initiatives across your organization. It could be business planning. It could be the way that we're going about our business planning, which we're actually just went through that at Mediafly and was largely influenced by marketing. It could be driving deeper sales alignment with sales, like you just talked about, right? And it could be truly broadening the role of the CMO as the chief market officer, not the chief marketing officer. Because marketing suggests, again, tactics, right? But truly the person that keeps their finger on the pulse of the consumer, or the buyer, I guess, because in our case it's B2B, the buyer and how the buying behaviors change. And that's a much bigger job, right? And beyond that, even, talking about the day-to-day, honestly, what it feels like, if you, for those of you folks out there that want to be CMOs or VPs of marketing, if you want to if you think we'll only be doing marketing, think again. Because on any given day, besides everything we already talked about, you could be doing global operations. If you're managing a global team, a global marketing team, and you have the global hub in the US, which is usually the model, and then regional hubs and local teams, there's a large part of that job is operations, is getting, the teams across the world to all march to the same tune, right? You're in human resources because you're dealing with resource issues and hiring and so on, and not necessarily just within your team, but within the rest of the company. So, and of course, there's if you're in a smaller company versus a big company, the smaller companies, you tend to wear multiple hats, and I think you can touch other disciplines more so. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, your role will also depend on what stage of growth is your company in. Right. I mean, so for example, I'll give my example. When I started marketing at Mediafly, was it about 2 years ago? We were building marketing from the ground up. Right. We built a marketing team from scratch and had developed a strategy and deployed the tactics against it. And at the time, it was very much I need to build awareness because nobody knows about Mediafly and the category is not that mature. People don't really understand sales enablement. And then, we need to drive, generate pipelines. So we need demand tactics too, right? So at that point, it's what I call the foundation. And I had to do the foundation. I wouldn't have been trying to influence business strategy across the company or jump into, strategic discussions with the head of sales when I barely had the fundamentals of marketing built in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's got me thinking, because this is a lot, just day one, starting out, things that it sounds like you've got to grapple with right away. And so it got me thinking, and maybe, I don't know if you know this or not, but what's the average tenure for CMOs relative to the rest of the C-suite? And that kind of, I guess, gets into this question of like, why are folks failing at it at whatever that rate is?
Perfect timing to ask me that question. I was at a conference earlier this week. It was a CMO conference, and they mentioned the latest statistic, which is longer than you probably think. So it's actually 4 years is the average tenure now. Okay. The last number I had heard was 2 years, but apparently that was an old statistic of 10 years ago. So the new one is 4 years. And so I think that's a good thing. So we're lasting longer.
Right.
And I do think it's because you're seeing the broadening of the role, right? So you truly become more of a strategic advisor to the entire organization. I mean, look, if you're going to have a C in your title, you should be advising and driving growth across the organization with the rest of your peers in the executive team. Right, that's your job. Otherwise, you shouldn't have the same.
Right, for sure.
And hopefully this is happening more and more, and that's why we're seeing the average tenure being 4 years. But here's another statistic. So that was interesting that I heard, which is more gloomy, which is that I think it was only 25% of CEOs trust their CMO. However, as a frame of reference, 90% of CEOs trust their CFO. And then here's another one that I think is related. I think only 25% of CEOs come from marketing. And so if I triangulate all of this, I think what that tells me is because most CEOs don't come from marketing, they don't really understand it or relate to it.
Right.
So they have less of a trust factor because they don't really know what you're doing. Right? Potentially. And they trust the CFO because it's all numbers, and they likely also, and many CEOs come from finance. So there's that comfort level there, right? So I don't know how much what I'm getting at is I don't know how much it's perception versus reality.
Today's growth story is all about search engine marketing. The company we're highlighting is SentinelOne. This challenger cybersecurity brand was set out to disrupt the endpoint protection space. Their brand was top-notch, their product was innovative, but they were struggling to gain traction online in an already developed industry. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first quarter of working with Directive, SentinelOne was able to increase their organic traffic by 128% and overall lead volume by an outstanding 251%. And I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
I think I have a rather controversial theory on that. And
okay, let me hear it.
You can completely distance yourself from this theory. But I was reading the other day about, because it's part of my job to get folks to come on this show. And what I'm looking for, who I want to come on the show, I want to make sure that it's a representative, selection of folks who are practitioners in this field, right? Mm-hmm. Or at least at that role. So something like 45% of B2B CMOs are women, to 55% of them being men. That number is lower, much lower, when you look at CEOs and CFOs. Yeah. I'm not saying there's a correlation, but it doesn't feel too far-fetched to me. Mm-hmm. That along with this idea that these CEOs are folks who already didn't come from a marketing background. So there's already one little roadblock to this trust factor. I'm wondering if there's something else going on there, and I'll leave it at that. But that's interesting. That's interesting, disappointing. But the thing is, what you also said was that women are lasting in this. Individuals who are CMOs are lasting longer now than they were 10 years ago, and there's more women in this role than there were 10 years ago. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it. I just truth bombed y'all.
I'm gonna add one thing, and then we'll leave it there. So as you see, hopefully more women moving into CEO roles, right? Let's hope for that. Some of the statistic might change, and the trust. Mm-hmm. But look, the good news is CMO tenure average is 4 years, and I think it's on the CMOs, to establish ourselves as truly the chief market officer. So we're not thought of as the tactics person. Oh, okay, right. Go do some PR and go do some digital campaigns for me. I mean, that's on us.
It is. It's not tactics. It's not fluff. It's the cornerstone, really, of everybody's efforts, right? So much is contingent on well-executed marketing and marketing leadership. So everything I said it's just conjecture, y'all. It's the views of Nikki Ivy are hers and hers alone.
Wow, you're going some places there. I had not. My brain didn't go there, but hey, you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason why I went there, I'll tell you, Isabelle, is just because, like I said, it's been difficult when I look for folks to come on this show to find folks who are willing to have the conversation about what their experience really is, making in the C-suite, and to find folks to come on the show who are representative of who's actually in these roles. There's 45% women, but it's not always 45% women that are in positions where they're able to be spokespeople for what they do as their profession and for their organization. So that's why one of the reasons why it was important for me to have you on the show, other than the fact that you're really, really good at what you do. And some folks are not. And that's one of the things you want to dig into with us. So when it comes to why folks fail, those folks who don't make it the 4 years or who don't make it past the 4 years, what are some of the reasons why you think that happened?
Yeah. So I would say, I think about the answer for me there is two buckets. It's in two buckets. One is what's on us, and then the other is more external factors that we don't control as much. So as far as why they fail, is for the former, I would say they fail because they're not keeping their finger on the pulse of the consumer and how things are changing. Right, you need to get ahead of those trends, and otherwise, by the time you figure it out, it's probably too late. The second one is, there's a lot of noise around marketing in organizations. Everyone has an opinion. Let's be honest, and because there's some subjectivity to it, it's really a combination of art and science. Yes, there's a lot of analytics and there's data, and we should be looking at that. But there's also, a certain amount of subjectivity and listening to your gut and taking some risks and testing things, right? And so tends to be a lot of noise around marketing, and so it can be easy to lose sight of what you think is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And it becomes the loudest voice in the room, wins the argument, or it's the priority du jour, as I call it. Okay, maybe not du jour, but of the week, right? Or let's go do this initiative, or launch this campaign, or I have this idea. And then you kind of bouncing around and doing too many things, and perhaps actually not doing the most important thing. And I think that's on you as a CMO, right, to control that. But that also leads me to the other side of why CMOs fail, which is the priorities that are set for them within the organization. The priorities that are set for them by the CEO, right? And so I think that's something you have to be very clear on when you take on a CMO role. What is the CEO's expectation of the role? Going back to where we started our conversation, there's a broadening of the role, but at the origin, there's some key areas where there's a marketing communications role where it's primarily like sales support, and you're driving like demand gen tactics. And then there's perhaps a broader role from there that also encompasses more like owning the customer and the market and truly influencing, the product roadmap and innovation. And then it goes bigger from there, where there's CMOs that have enterprise-wide responsibilities in corporate sales, and they're running sales, they're running innovation, and so on, right? So there's definitely different levels. Mm-hmm. And so going into the role is understanding what does the company really need out of the CMO. And from there, then how do we define the role? And then how do we define the priorities? And by the way, what does success look like? What am I being measured on? Right? If that's not clear, you can really be taken into many different directions and not focusing on things. And you don't want the goalposts to be constantly moving.
Yeah.
That can be very hard.
Yeah, I imagine. And so that answers a lot of the questions I was going to ask, which were, sort of what going in should a person consider when they're, wanting to make sure that they last in this role. And I think you're absolutely right that it has to do with making sure that you're completely clear on what the expectations are to begin with. Mm-hmm. So that, like you also said, this moving of the goalpost thing doesn't happen, because that's frustrating at any level. And I imagine could be extremely frustrating as a CMO. So thanks for laying that out for us. For those folks who are also out there just starting out in this role and, wanting to last, in addition to what you just told us, before we move on to the next segment, can you give us a couple of things that have been working for you as far as how to avoid some of those pitfalls that take folks out of this role?
So I don't have a breakthrough or shattering answer for you. It always goes back for me to communication and dialogue. That's to me, that's the most important thing in any relationship, personal or professional. So you're reporting to the CEO, have the conversation. Things are not clear. Things are not working. I don't understand. I've lost track of what you need, what my priorities are. Be honest about it. You can be polite about it. I'm not saying be rude about it, but you need to have the conversation. And I'll be very transparent. We just went through that at Mediafly. I'm lucky to work with a CEO that's a very inspiring, very caring, very goal-oriented person. But because he's caring, he's very, he's an open book, right? And you can talk to him about anything. He'll listen. He'll give you feedback. So we had the very open discussion about it, where I felt like I was losing track of my priorities, in large part because of what was going on around the organization. And we kind of reestablished order, so to speak. And that came out of several conversations and, frankly, frustrations we were having with each other. And we figured it out. We figured it out in a big way. Yeah. So you gotta speak up. You gotta put it out there, and hopefully you reporting to someone who can do the same, because communication has to be one way. It can't be two ways. I mean, both ways. Mm-hmm. It can't be just one way.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Certainly, I tend to not trust folks who are like, all right, here's how you're going to win every single time. So the fact that you're like, look, man, you just got to communicate and pay attention and stay up to date on what the expectations are and do the best you can. And I think that's how all you can do to succeed at really anything. So I love the way that you talk about what you do. I love the transparency that you gave us today and the way that you laid all of this out. Thank you so much. Congratulations again. I expect we'll see your name on many lists to come alongside other powerhouse marketers. But now that I've successfully picked your brain, Isabelle, and seen what I could get out of it, it's time for you to tell us about what you are putting in it. So tell us about a learning resource that you engage with that is, informing your approach or that's just got you excited these days.
Yeah. So, it's interesting for me, and I don't know that anyone or everyone can have access to this, but I'm lucky to have, a great advisor on our board. So we have a functional board, so where we have, advisors that represent the different departments. And so I get a lot of knowledge out of that person, and including previous advisors from the board and, having one-on-one interactions. And so related to that, you can also go to other CMOs within your network and so on. I get a lot out of HBR, the Harvard Business Review, as a resource.
Yeah,
lots of stuff around marketing there that really has got me thinking. And I would say those are the primary things. I've used Marketing Profs a lot in the past. That's a little more tactical, but it is a great way. They have some great webinars, to sort of like shore up your knowledge on tactics that you may not be as knowledgeable in. I've heard great things about their annual conference. I have not attended, but I've heard very, very good things. But for me, my primary source is going to people, other CMOs that frankly have been doing it way longer than me and getting their advice.
I love that. That's one of my favorite answers. Knowing how to, just first of all, understanding that the people around you are a resource, and then knowing how to, pursue and leverage them as a resource, I think is a skill in and of itself. So I love that answer. Thanks so much for sharing.
And one thing I would add to that, because it also related to your last question about, sort of the everyday and how do you make sure you not fail is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't expect that because you're the CMO, you have all the answers. That would be amazing. Hey, I would love to say that, but I'm not that person. I don't have all the answers. So there is nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. But I know, the important thing is knowing what questions to ask, knowing that you have a problem, that recognizing that something is not working, that you need to fix it. You may not know how to fix it, but you can ask for help on how to fix it. But the most important thing is recognizing, where you need to focus because something is not working.
Excellent advice. Hey, Isabelle, I know that everybody listening, just like me, has become fast fans of yours. They're going to want to know how to keep up with you. Tell folks what's the easiest way to connect with you.
So best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I would say find me on LinkedIn. Again, it's Isabelle Papoulias, and I'm usually quite responsive there.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, you gave us everything. You gave us insights. You gave us transparency. It's everything I ever want for this show. So super glad you came on to talk to us today. We'll have to have you on again further down the line to talk about a look back at your first year as a CMO. But until then, we'll close it out. Thanks so much, Isabelle.
Thank you.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.